Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Find a living in fisheries. The UAS Fisheries Technology Program offers online study from anywhere in Alaska, plus labs and workshops in many Alaska towns.
Is most likely a chum.
Find your living without leaving where you are. Fisheries Technology from UAS.
The National Weather Service.
And good Sunday, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. It's the 3rd of April now. As always, we encourage you to stay up to date with your local weather information, and you can do that easily online at weather.gov/Alaska or call us on the weather info line at 800-472-0391. If you're following us on Facebook at NWS Alaska, you would have just seen a post by the Anchorage office about the increased auroral activity, or at least the possibility of seeing that tonight. Hopefully, clear skies will be in your favor, and that looks like there could be a decent opportunity, at least in South Central and probably parts of Southeast and Prince William Sound as well. So make sure you look up tonight before you go to bed, or if you happen to get out of bed for a little drink of water or something, or check on the kids, make sure you poke your head outside and see what's going on overhead. Could be a good show tonight. As always, we encourage you to follow us on Twitter and on YouTube, and during the afternoon you'll get your daily afternoon map briefing about 4 o'clock or so each day on NWS Anchorage's YouTube account, and you can check that and get a sneak peek of where the surface charts are going, and then check in, of course, here with us on Alaska Weather every night. The hazardous weather outlook across the North Slope and the northern slopes of the Brooks Range show that winter weather advisories are still in force all the way from Point Hope to Kaktovik tonight. The main issue really isn't going to be more accumulating snow on top of what you've already seen. It will be the persistent easterly winds that are blustery throughout the region on about 35 to 40 miles per hour or so, and that's going to lower visibility and move around some of that fluffy, light snow that has been gracing the northern and interior parts of Alaska for the last couple of days now. So winter weather advisories will go at least until midnight for many of these areas, and in some cases until about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. So winter weather advisories are usually the lower end of warning alerts that we give folks in Alaska there, and that simply means that the weather could be approaching levels that'll make it difficult to travel or difficult to get from place to place there, or might just be dangerous or offer some exposure dangers to you if you happen to be outside. In this case, it could limit your visibility, make it difficult to travel in some cases. So be extra careful if you're out and about, especially in the yellow shaded areas tonight, but anywhere that the wind is blowing and the snow is moving around as a result there. So hazardous weather tonight. As you look at the breakup map, this is most recently updated on the 30th of March. Of course, we're now at the 3rd of April. Just want to give folks an update, though, that the River Forecast Center is preparing for breakup, as many villages are, of course. If you're on any of the main rivers out there, you know this is the time of the year that changes start to occur on the rivers, and it's very important to track those. So if you're in any of the villages in Alaska that are on the rivers, I certainly want to help us help you by reporting changes that you're seeing on the river. Pictures are great. Simple message on email is very helpful, and you can always send those to the River Forecast Center at aprfc.arh.noaa.gov or weather.gov/APRFC will get you there as well. What do we like to know about? Well, if you start to see any openings of the ice, if you see any changes or buildup of the ice along some of the bends or the turns along the river, you know what's different about your river and your village in your area. Let us know what you're seeing there. And of course, River Watch will be starting up in just a couple weeks. And that's where we partner with the state of Alaska and your community to help keep your communities downstream safe. So everybody plays a part in making conditions more easy to communicate to everyone up and down your river. So thanks for your help with that. And right now, the latest status there as of last week was mostly ice in most of the rivers around most of Alaska, but conditions will be changing soon. We all know that. Here's a look at the satellite picture now. As we check on the latest pattern here, really not a whole lot different than the last couple of days. You see low pressure working northward out of the North Pacific and into the southern Bering Sea. And we still have this kind of wave of moisture working its way further and further northward into southeastern Alaska. You can see the clouds slowly filling in across northern parts of southeast tonight. Not a great sign if you really wanted to check on the aurora. It looks like it will be fairly visible for many northern latitudes tonight, maybe even some of the southern latitudes. But we do have a good deal of dry air across the middle Yukon into the middle Tanana Valley and southward into the Cook Inlet region and Prince William Sound out toward Yakutat. That extends eastward all the way into the central parts of the Yukon. A lot of low clouds across the north. Some of those have been producing snow earlier today. Most of what we're seeing now from the surface observations across the North Slope have just been limited visibility because of the blowing snow around, not so much the falling snow. So a little bit of a difference there. And across the west, northerlies have been working across the ice and pushing that ice edge further and further south. It's breaking off pieces of ice as we go and moving that 60 to 80% concentration line further and further south, very close to the continental shelf actually, out here across the western Bering Sea. And then around St. Paul, the ice edge is still fairly far north, as you'll see in just a little bit, but it is south of St. Matthew, it is south of Nunivak Island. And once you get into the Kuskokwim Delta region, we still have plenty of warm air working northward. That's limiting any further southern growth at this point. So a lot of warm air is still working up the west coast through Norton Sound. And up toward Nome and Kotzebue Sound, you should expect to continue to see areas of snow as we head into the beginning of the week. Here's a look at the surface chart now. Low pressure sitting off the Chukchi Seacoast at 1,005 millibars. And you'll notice that tight packing of pressure gradient lines or sea level pressure lines out across the northern coastal plain. With that, we've got those two arrows there that make the cross, and that just tells us that there is blowing snow. That's what that symbol means. And we've seen that reported pretty much all day long across the North Slope throughout the day. Expect that to continue as we go into Monday and Tuesday. In the meantime, high pressure sitting across the Chugach at 1,019 millibars. That's kept things fairly clear across south central and southeast, but it is weakening enough to allow low pressure to work up the southeastern coastline with that more clouds lifting northward and the chance for rainfall. We've seen at least a little bit of that around Ketchikan and Annette today, and south of the Alaska Peninsula, we've got low pressure at 978 millibars. That's going to keep winds up across some parts of the Alaska Peninsula, at least the gap-prone areas. Now, as we go into tonight, low pressure continues to just slowly meander northward. It's not really going with any great purpose right now. A 979 millibar low off of Sitka there. It's starting to spread more clouds and moisture northward past Sitka, past Petersburg and Wrangell and into Hyder. And then northward, a very dry and clear sky across south central and a good chunk of the Copper River Basin, even into the middle Tanana Valley there, with stationary boundaries sitting just south of the Brooks Range and over the Chukchi Seacoast. Stationary boundaries don't always sit exactly in the same spot, but they don't move very much. They're not going one direction or the other. So this whole complex probably won't see a whole lot of changes until we get into the midweek. Out across the Chukchi Sea, you can see we've got our northerlies coming down. The western part and central areas of the Bering Sea, and right along the coast there we have the interaction of the wet and warm air working northward and the moisture that's collected along that boundary there. And what that means is rain and snow showers will probably continue from Kotzebue Sound all the way down to Norton Sound. But once you get a little bit further east and south of the Yukon Valley, there's enough dry air there that most of that moisture is really not going to have a huge impact. It should be drying up and limiting how much further eastward that precipitation can expand. Across the Pribilofs, rain and snow showers there. For the central and western chains, snow showers are expected tonight. And then as we get into Monday, you'll notice our southern system is trying to expand its warm and wet air eastward and northward into the northern Gulf Coast and out across southwest once again. It's about 980 millibars, so it's filling in as low pressure is nothing more than a vacuum and trying to gather in air and fill the void that it contains. Out across the YK Delta, periods of rain and snow should be expected, especially along the coast there. And once we get up toward the Seward Peninsula and Kotzebue Sound, snow is more likely, especially across the Brooks Range and eastward. And notice again, those pressure lines are packed in pretty tight across the coastal plain. That means our blowing snow chance will continue across the region. The best chance for accumulating snow looks to be around Adigan and Anaktuvuk Pass and just east. And most of that probably won't be over the pass during the day. Visibility looks pretty good for flying. And across the Chukchi Seacoast, better chance for accumulating snow there around Wainwright and south. Now for southeast, it's back into the rain there. Clouds and light rainfall is expected all the way from Yakutat and southward. Doesn't look like it'll be terribly heavy at this point, but you'll notice that southerly flow is working back in your favor there, so that keeps the moisture in place, and you'll see that again on Tuesday. Low pressure moves into the central areas of Yukon and just north and east of Whitehorse as you head into south central. Rain showers are possible. It looks like most of that will not be over the Cook Inlet region, but the surrounding hills and probably the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula and western Prince William Sound. However, there might be some passing showers over the Anchorage and area as well as the Parks Highway and the Susitna Valley. So don't be surprised if you see at least a few raindrops tomorrow afternoon, but the bulk of it probably won't be over Anchorage. Southward, low pressure is hovering across Sandpoint at 990 millibars. Not a big change again from what we saw the previous day, but there is a stronger storm that starts to work into our region by Tuesday afternoon, and that drops to 976 millibars. And winds start to pick up from Adak westward toward Kiska and Attu as we get into Tuesday afternoon. Let's look at your surface charts. Let's get into what happened today. 40s and 50s for southeast, a fairly mild day even as clouds built in from south to north. Yakutat was 49 degrees. Prince William Sound saw temps in the mid-40s, 48 in Anchorage, 45 for Homer. Heading up the Susitna Valley at 46 around Talkeetna, 43 around Glen Allen. It was 40 in Fairbanks, 42 in Healy, 41 Fort Greely, and 45 for Eagle, about the same there in Northway today. For Fort Yukon, we saw 21 degrees and colder still as you head up toward Arctic Village at 14. -1 for Kaktovik, -6 around Prudhoe Bay and Dead Horse, and -8 for Atkasuk and Wainwright, with Point Barrow and the region there showing 5 below today. 10 was the number in Kivalina and 12 above for Kotzebue. 20 above for Nome with Unalakleet at 39, Galena 38, McGrath 40 degrees, and places like AKwx around 39 degrees, 43 for Bethel, 7 around Gamble and St. Lawrence Island. Southward into Bristol Bay, we saw temps in the 40s for King Salmon and Dillingham, as well as Lake Iliamna. Kodiak had 46, 32 in St. Paul, even warmer in St. George this afternoon. The Alaska Peninsula had temps from the lower 40s around Sandpoint into the upper 30s for False Pass, Cold Bay, and westward into Unalaska and Dutch Harbor. In the mid-30s were seen around Adak and Atka, and Shemya called in 30 degrees. For southeast, overnight lows will stay in the mid to upper 30s. Some areas along the outer coast will jump into the mid-40s overnight. Teens and 20s for some around the Copper River Basin, but look for 30s around Prince William Sound, 27 for Anchorage, 29 around Homer and Seward. Up the Parks Highway we go into Talkeetna and mid-20s there, about the same for Fairbanks tonight. Eagle holding around 15, 11 for Fort Yukon, 13 below in Barrow. About 25 or so for Nome. Southwestern temperatures for the YK Delta at or even above freezing, especially as you head south of Bethel into Bristol Bay. Upper 30s for the Alaska Peninsula, 26 in St. Paul and St. George, and lower 30s for most of the Aleutians. High temperatures tomorrow will reach into the mid-30s tomorrow, about 32 in St. Paul. Mid to upper 40s for the middle Tanana Valley, southward into south central and the Cook Inlet region, lower 50s are possible. Upper 40s to low 50s for southeast, 20 around Arctic Village, 1 above for Barrow, and Nome, you're looking at a high of 36. Norton Sound also above freezing for the daytime on Monday. Here's your flying weather now. Notice IFR conditions all along the front across the Gulf and across the YK Delta from Bethel westward toward Nunivak Island and the Pribilofs, but then all the poor visibility in the lower ceilings break up fairly quickly. Around Juneau, expect VFR to start, and for most of the passes, that should be the case. Watch what happens by the afternoon, though. A lot of the IFR across the Gulf shifts westward toward Kodiak. So if you're in Kodiak and looking to get out with better visibility, tomorrow morning is a better bet. South of St. Lawrence Island to the Pribilofs and into Dutch Harbor and Unalaska, IFR conditions could be present, but most of the interior, most of the passes, with the exceptions of areas around Fort Yukon up toward Arctic Village, should be at least at VFR. There could be some patchy MVFR around the coastal plain tomorrow afternoon. Here are those pass conditions at Anaktuvik and Adigan Pass. With snow showers developing late in the day, most of the day should be spent at VFR. Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, expect VFR conditions there. For Rainy Pass, things look pretty good. For Windy Pass, we're calling VFR through your Monday, Isabel Pass, and it looks like Mentasta Pass should also be visual flight rule through most of your Monday afternoon. Tanita Pass, we're calling VFR. Portage Pass looks pretty good at this point, and Chilkoot and White Pass are going to get the A-OK for now. Freezing levels show that warmer air is lifting northward once again across southwestern Alaska. The 2,000-foot freezing level there showing up just east of Norton Sound, and you can see that warm and wet air is spreading out once again across the central and western Gulf, a little bit different than what we saw earlier this morning. As we look at the icing potential, we'll see levels around 2,000 feet and above for the Chukchi Seacoast, most of that light to isolated moderate through St. Lawrence Island. A little bit of a higher concentration of moisture and cold air around the Pribilofs and south, but that's going to be around 6,000 feet or so. and across the central and northern Gulf above 4,000 feet from Kodiak Island eastward toward the northern parts of the Panhandle, again above 4,000 feet. The jet stream has our trough of low pressure just south of Sand Point. That is guiding winds of 100 to 160 knots around a ridge of high pressure across the western continental United States. And you can see the effects of that ridge guiding wind up and over Alaska there from 50 to 70 knots. That's allowing that warmer air to spread northward. And at 9,000 feet, you can see that southerly flow working its way up through the Bering Strait. Northerlies on the western side of that, working through central and western parts of the Aleutians, and that's also helping to guide the overall weather at the surface from north to south, pushing more and more of that ice further southward, though it's not very thick. South and westerlies are working into southeastern Alaska at 50 to 60 knots, and winds remain fairly light across the interior at 15 to 25 knots on the south side of high pressure. That high pressure system across the Beaufort Sea is a little bit further north at 3,000 feet, and you'll be able to see that southerly flow working its way into southeastern Alaska at about 15 to 30 knots there. East and southeasterlies working across the Yukon Valley about 10 to 25, fairly light winds there, and northerlies coming off of eastern Russia descend into the central Aleutians about 10 to 25 knots with low pressure south of Sand Point. Some of the stronger winds we're seeing at this level are around Kodiak Island and southward, looking at 20 to 40 knots from Bristol Bay to about Castle Cape and Chignik, with winds across the North Slope at about 20 to 25 from the south and the east. So turbulence looks like this. Below 4,000 feet for the coastal plain there. Most of that's going to be light to isolated, moderate at best. We're watching for a little bit of stronger signatures for turbulence from the Capes all the way through the Bering Sea coast of the Alaska Peninsula, generally below 4,000 feet, and that extends into the central and eastern chain as well. Look for some light chop around the Kenai Peninsula, generally on the western side of the Prince William Sound, all the way out toward Yakutat, as a fast-moving, low-level river of air crawls into low pressure sitting out across the Gulf. So that'll speed up there and probably get a little more bumpy as the day goes on. That's a look at your aviation forecast. In just a few minutes, I'll be back with an update on your sea ice edge as well as your marine weather. Stay tuned.
This is a picture of myself and my son, and a picture of the Edry in the background.
In the summer of 1958, Howard Ulrich was a commercial fisherman from Pelican, following feeding birds and word that the fish were biting near Lituya Bay.
We came in there somewhere around 6 or 7 o'clock at night and had made dinner and anchored up and went to bed. In fact, I was asleep, and then that earthquake started, so that woke me up. I saw the splash. Something I was looking off at the shoreline, and something out of the corner of my eye caught my attention, and it turned out to be this big splash. Okay, then the splash, you see that big horrible splash, and it looks like, you know, like Bikini, where they set off the atomic bomb, you know. But then as the water is falling back down, you know, into the bay, out of the bottom of that came this big wave. And that wave was actually, we figure, it was about 800 feet high.
So you, Howard, were right here.
Right.
And you saw the debris fly up in this far end near the head of Lituya Bay.
Right.
The wave then moved across, was 800 feet high out in this area, you figure. Ulrich estimates the original 1,720-foot wave had dropped to about 150 feet by the time it reached them.
We're actually looking down in the trees, and I'm pretty sure we were over the land at that time, and still, you know, pushing that old Chrysler Crown to get us up over the top of that wave. And then, of course, the water coming back down off of the land gave us another push out, helped us out, actually. So everything worked out about as good as it could.
Ulrich says his son's only memory of the wave is the fear on his father's face.
I just felt another small tremor, so I better try and get the heck out of here right away, I guess.
By now, the water was churning with smaller waves filled with giant trees and ice chunks. Ulrich worried they'd cut off his escape route.
There's a big bunch of junk closing in behind me here, so I'm going to have to go out. It's just solid. It's just like it's growing. The whole thing came off, of course, brush and everything. It's just solid behind me, and when it comes out, it's going to block the whole entrance. So so I guess I better get the hell out of here.
Howard and Sonny were the lucky ones. The Badger was tossed over the spit near the bay's entrance and swamped. Bill and Vi Swanson were rescued, but Bill died in Lituya Bay only a few years later on his one and only return trip. The Wagners and the Sunmore just disappeared.
God, what an awful sight. You ought to see it in there. It's like the end of the world.
Did you think you were going to make it, or did you even have a
No,
thought
I didn't
like that?
think it just surprised me when, when we got to the top of the wave. The thing that saved us, of course, the wave didn't break. It was just a big round wave and just a big swell. And boats are made to handle big swells.
Despite his wild ride, Ulrich has no fear of the water. He's retired now in the picturesque coastal community of Sitka. There have been at least 9 major earthquakes along the Fairweather Fault in Lituya Bay since 1899, yet life always finds a way to return. Though major waves had struck Lituya Bay about once every 25 years since 1899, it's now been almost half a century since the largest tsunami ever recorded.
I've had the geologist who flew up there the day after this happened, and he said that the whole top of that ridge is fractured. He said it's going to happen again and again and again.
What we do know is that the land that is between that fault line and the ocean has not yet docked or held on solidly. So geologists and glaciologists say that that land is moving northward more quickly than on the continental plate. And so we assume that there will be more earthquakes. Will they happen in Lituya Bay? Will Lituya Bay send another tsunami wave out? No one knows for sure. But I think that anytime anyone enters the bay, they think about those legends and they wonder if it'll happen again.
Now let's turn our attention to the ice edge now out across the Bering Sea. You'll notice if you've been paying attention in the last couple days, this has shifted a little bit further south. And with persistent northeasterly winds for several days, that shouldn't be a huge surprise. But one thing that's limiting how much further this will go is the warm air that's traveling up and over Bristol Bay and the YK Delta. So we're probably not going to see this go a whole lot further. However, the concentration there in white is 80% or higher. You'll see that it becomes a lot more ragged passing St. Matthew Island. And here's St. Paul and Macoriuk and Nunivak Island. It's really not making any advances toward the Kuskokwim Delta whatsoever. So again, this is our latest ice edge. There are a few areas of Polinias up around Point Hope and west of Wales. Those are the major changes up north, but the main issue today is the northeasterlies pushing that main ice pack a little bit further south. Nothing doing right now in Cook Inlet whatsoever. Here's a look at the forecast now for southeast. You see northerlies coming up in the Lynn Canal up to 25 knots on that northerly wind with a 5-foot sea. 25 knots from the south and southeast tomorrow for Stevens Passage area and southward into Clarence Strait. The outer coast looking at south and southeasterlies 20 to 25 with seas up as high as 9 feet outside of Cross Sound and Gustavus, and then south of Sitka about 5 to 9 feet out around Clarence Strait as well. Or the Dixon entrance, I should say. With a westerly flow coming in on Tuesday, that's around 20 knots, 15 to 20 from Cross Sound northward toward Yakutat. 25 knots from the south in the Lynn Canal with a 5-foot sea on Tuesday, and 20 to 35 knots as you move southerly inside the inner channels there, 35 knots inside of Clarence Strait. Northeasterlies are expected inside of Prince William Sound tomorrow with east and northeasterlies across the northern Gulf. 20 to 30 knots for most of Cook Inlet, 4 to 6-foot seas there west of the Barren Islands, 35 knots with a 10-foot sea. Inside Shelikof Strait, the seas get even higher, up to 14 feet with 9-foot seas east of the Barrens at 35 knots. Winds diminish there for Tuesday on a southeasterly flow, 15 knots, 15 to 20 elsewhere in the northern Gulf. Easterlies inside of Prince William Sound, inside of Cook Inlet, 15 to 25. Looking for 3 to 5-foot seas there, and east and southeasterlies crossing the Kodiak Island region with seas higher on the eastern side at 12 feet there on that 20-knot wind. Inside of Bristol Bay, look for 30 knots from the east with a 6-foot sea. Easterlies down the Bering Sea coast on a 10-foot sea there expected on 30 knots. 35-knot winds there on the Pacific coast with 14-foot seas on Monday. For Tuesday, look for more of a light and variable flow south of Sand Point. Southeasterlies from Castle Cape to Chignik, and Bristol Bay looking at northeasterlies at 20 knots with a 4-foot sea, 15-foot seas down the coast. For the Aleutians, the central and eastern chain looking at 30 to 35 from the north and northwest, 25 knots though south of Unalaska and Nikolsky with a 15-foot sea expected. Northerlies north of Adak and Atka at 30 knots with a 12-foot sea. Notice the southerlies developing from Kiska to Attu on 15 knots with a 6-foot sea there for Monday. That becomes stronger from the southeast on Tuesday, with westerlies over Adak and Atka, 8 to 9-foot seas on either side, and northwesterlies from Atka eastward toward Unalaska. And it looks like 30 knots in most areas with 11 to 12-foot seas on the Bering Sea coast and 9 to 13-foot seas along the Pacific coast for Tuesday. For the west coast, northerlies coming across St. Lawrence Island at 25 knots over the ice still, and you'll notice around the Kuskokwim Delta region we've got easterlies kind of blocking that advancing flow that we were just talking about with the sea ice edge. 9-foot seas there, and also around the Pribilofs from St. Paul and St. George expecting northerlies for Monday afternoon. That diminishes to 25 knots for Tuesday. North and easterlies inside the Kuskokwim Delta, northerlies from Nunivak Island through St. Lawrence Island and over St. Matthew Island, about 15 to 20 for Tuesday afternoon. Across the North Slope, easterlies will be strongest around Kaktovik and the eastern Beaufort Seacoast, 30 to 35 there, 20 knots from the east over Cape Lisburne and Point Hope, and southward, northerlies over the Kotzebue Sound region, 25 knots there, again over the ice. For Tuesday, a little bit of a northeasterly shift from Cape Lisburne into the outer areas of Kotzebue Sound from Wales and northward. From Kaktovik to Barrow, a little bit of a stronger flow through the day from 30 to as high as 40 knots north of Kaktovik to about Dead Horse for Tuesday afternoon. That's a look at your marine forecast. Let's recap what's going on around Alaska tonight. Winter weather advisories are in effect at least until midnight for many of the North Slope communities and coastlines. That will continue to tell us that blowing snow is the main issue there, with gusty winds from about 30 to 40 miles per hour. Not expecting a whole lot of new snow to fall, but there will be snow showers in the region, as you can see along the frontal boundary, and tight pressure gradient across the North Slope. Looking southward, rain will expand up the southeastern coastline and the inner channels as we go into Monday and Tuesday. As a front creeps northward, expect more rain for Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, and the eastern chain, with rain and snow showers across the western coast. Most of the interior will be fairly dry as we head into Monday and Tuesday, and perhaps give you a better chance at watching the aurora tonight. Good luck.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Alyeska Pipeline Service Company, fueling philanthropic programs and dedicated to creating educational and professional opportunities for Alaska Native people.